We're in this room, although actually this is kind of cozy, but apparently we're having some IT problems, and so 412 is messed up at the moment.
Sure.
That's why we're in here.
I mean,
Are we on?
yeah, that microphone belongs to channel 7. I think you have a microphone on your tabletop right in front of you, a circular size.
Oh, bunch of papers.
Oh, no. He's taking care of it. But at least you know the microphone works.
Can I bang it some more?
Just let me take my.
Ma'am, I owe you a call too.
Yes, sir.
Everybody calls. No, I don't owe you. I saw you yesterday. How much longer did, oh, how much longer did the service go?
Fix it.
How much longer did the service go? How much longer did the service go?
I left when you left,
Okay.
and it was breaking up.
Were you there, Sam?
I was there. I was in the balcony. Yeah,
And we're good, sir.
All right. If he says we're good, then we're good.
He says we're good too.
Good morning. This is the press conference that I do before a legislative meeting, and tomorrow, March 3rd, we will have a legislative meeting. For some reason, the secretary years ago told me I should always point out what number legislative meeting. So tomorrow's the 25th legislative meeting of House Period 26. We will have a committee of the whole meeting preceding it. That's what we call an additional meeting because it's not a regularly scheduled committee of the whole. We'll be marking up a report that the committee staff did. I want to acknowledge Blaine Stum on Department of Buildings Illegal Construction Enforcement, gaps, deficiencies, and recommendations. This will be the second report we've done concerning the Department of Buildings, where we've looked in depth. The first was on housing code enforcement, and this is on illegal construction. The two are issues about which we get a lot of complaints from constituents with regard to Department of Buildings. We're also marking up some legislation, an appointment to the Commission on Out of School Time Grants and Youth Outcomes Commission, a tax forgiveness for two properties owned or operated by some, one at 2607 Connecticut Avenue and the other at 411 Kansas Avenue. Architect and Engineer Good Samaritan Amendment Act, which deals with architects who would, if on request, when there is some sort of an emergency, like a natural disaster, that they have some protection if they're acting as good Samaritans. And then two namings, Jules Way and Lenore Baker Way. From other committees, looks like it's mostly confirmations. There are, I think, 4 nominations to the Housing Production Trust Fund and several bills that have come out. A committee on Youth Affairs and the Judiciary Committee confirming Francisco Diaz as Chief Medical Examiner. He's been acting for the last a long time. So it'd be nice if that's out of the way, and Fire and EMS Medical Director confirmation. We have the legislative meeting, and at the legislative meeting, there'll be final reading on some amendments to our existing tree preservation law, the Urban Forestry Tree Canopy Protection Act. We're actually reducing the diameter, meaning from, I think it's 45 inches to 40 inches. Don't hold me to that. The legislation says exactly what it is, but in any event, more trees will be subject to tree protection. What we're trying to do is maintain and expand the tree canopy in the district for a number of environmental reasons and aesthetic reasons. And in fact, the canopy's been shrinking a little bit over the last decade. And so this is meant to address that. We also have on the agenda final reading on amendments to the price gouging law that after the pandemic, we realized that there ought to be some changes that reflect experience with regard to protecting consumers from price gouging when there's an emergency like a public health emergency or a natural disaster. First reading on the school's First Amendment, which includes what I'll call loss of buying power in schools. You know, Schools First is all about protecting the budgets, maintaining financial stability in specific schools, not the school system, but the specific schools. And what we've come to realize is that there is a cost attributed to teachers. It's an average position cost. It's not the actual cost. And can we do something about that door opening and closing because it's squeaking a lot? Or maybe just have it ajar, or don't let people come in through that door. So at any rate, this is an amendment to Schools First that protects schools with regard to loss of buying power if the average position cost goes up. The holding company, which is a completely uninteresting title, is actually a bill about maintaining the licensure of the Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking. So it is significant and completely not controversial. But it is important to maintaining the license. Looking at emergencies, we have two bills dealing with what I'll call accountability when there are federal officers involved in arrest incidents. Both call for body worn cameras to be released. There is a tax exemption concerning the archdiocese. It's a little hard to believe that the Office of Tax and Revenue actually sent the archdiocese some tax bills for its churches. And so this is meant to clarify the law in that regard. That's kind of the meeting in a nutshell. I suspect there are questions about other things, if not about anything I just talked about. So let's go at it. Yes.
Chairman, well, on topic, if we can talk about that body cam emergency legislation, can you talk about why you're advocating for that, and do you think it will pass?
Well, I am a co-introducer on the one bill, but these bills, the impetus for them is coming from other members, Councilmember Pinto for one, Councilmember Robert White for the other. As you know, there's a frustration around the country and in the city with regard to the anonymity, particularly with ICE officers when they are conducting their raids and arrests. And this is meant to just try to pierce some of that anonymity or secrecy around their activities.
And do you think there will be any pushback to this from the federal government?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on that. I would say compared to what we've seen in other states, this is exceedingly tame. I mean, it's saying that a body worn camera of MPD officers, if they're on the scene, has to be made public. It's not, I think I've seen in other states where legislation to authorize arresting federal officers, this doesn't do that. Or demasking them, this doesn't do that. I mean, I do think they should not be wearing masks, but I'm hard pressed to see how far we can go in regulating federal law enforcement.
Chair.
Janet, and then you.
One question and then another about the decoupling stuff. So
I didn't even talk about decoupling.
real soon. So on ICE, Jeffrey Carroll, appeared before the council last week for the NPD oversight hearing, and I'm curious for your takeaways or for your response to some of his answers around federal cooperation. I don't know, do you have a reaction to?
Well, I didn't watch the hearing, so I got some secondhand reports with regard to it. As I understand it, there's a challenge in our insisting on a complete separation, that it makes sense that when there is public safety involved, that MPD, our officers who are present, to understand and respect our law. And so at what point does that appear to blend over to cooperation? I know that he talked about that, but as I'm standing here, since I didn't watch the hearing, I can't remember the specifics.
And just to follow up on that, filings in this ongoing, lawsuit that Mika and CASA are involved in against Homeland or DHS. surfaced two other cases where people were detained by ICE in DC police stations, one in December, one in January. And so obviously ICE activity in DC has greatly decreased since, the late summer and early fall. But this is still happening where there seems to be this nexus between DC police and then people getting detained by ICE. Do you think the council needs to take any other action to try to stop that?
I want to say the short answer is yes, but again, there's this very blurred line between our officers who understand and respect local law being present to try to protect our residents and it appearing to be cooperation. So I'm thinking of the incident that we all know about outside a charter school back in September, where a police officer arrested an individual and then unhandcuffed him and handed him to an ICE officer who handcuffed him. That's the kind of cooperation that we don't want to see. Because it's almost like facilitating, and as we all know, and as Chief Carroll has said, MPD is not doing immigration enforcement. But not knowing the details of the incident you're talking about, or the two incidents, I would rather that if ICE is arresting somebody, that they be held temporarily in a DC facility rather than sent anonymously to some ICE facility in some other state and then shipped off to a third state, where the person just pretty much disappears. It's a problem. However one wants to look at it, it's a problem. But I would rather that we, meaning district officials, have an awareness of what's happening to our individuals. And that's not the same as facilitating or enabling this immigration enforcement.
And then
If that looks like it's confusing, it is, because it's a blurred line.
yeah, I think it doesn't speak exactly to the incidents we're talking about, but maybe we can discuss it later. Decoupling, do you have a reaction to the revenue estimates and what Glenlee said? Where he basically said he wasn't going to account for the decoupling in the estimates that will, give you guys the budget number.
Well, the CFO briefed me on Thursday, so I have knowledge that it isn't apparent on the papers. I'm aware of the mayor's letter, and I think the mayor's correct that a revenue estimate has to account for revenue. And as far as we know, with the decoupling, there's about $700 million over the financial plan, and revenue estimates have to reflect that. They could reflect it with an asterisk, but you can't just pretend it doesn't exist at all. So I agree with the mayor's letter and the mayor's position that the revenue estimates were not a revenue estimate. I would go a little further. I think the chief financial officer has gone too far in trying to protect cash. Now, that doesn't seem to be on point with this issue of coupling or decoupling, but it's actually related. So the decoupling brings in about $700 million over the financial plan. It doesn't show up in the revenue estimates. If it's not in the revenue estimates, then the mayor can't budget against it. It's almost like hoarding cash. So when the CFO presented the annual financial report and how the fiscal year ended September 30th, we had about a $600 million surplus last year. Would you know that? No. From the presentation, there was no surplus because he put all the money in reserves. The reserves right now are at about 66 days. Our goal is 60 days. That is our goal, 60 days. That's 2 months worth of cash in our reserves to cover spending, operating costs, if there were to be just something unforeseen and a complete disaster, we have no other revenue. But we're at 66 days. And it's roughly $2.2 billion in our reserves. And it's a little hard to justify that when we're looking at severe cutbacks in health and human services, maybe even in the area of education. I'm thinking of policy. Last year, I think we were at 52 days. So as I said, there's this theme of hoarding cash. And then I would note that when you look at this year's revenue estimate, the estimates that came out last week that do not include the decoupling, it shows that in 2025, our year-over-year percent change in revenue was 8.5%. Think about that. I don't think anybody focused on this. 8.5%, that's hardly what he predicted a year earlier. The budget was based on projected growth of 2.8%. The difference is about $500 million. So his revenue estimates for the year that just ended were off by $500 million. That's a big difference. And this is seriously constraining the government from being able to provide services, this hoarding of cash.
Wanted to continue along that theme,
Yeah.
so what appears to be the disconnect from your vantage point? Because it seems like this is the replay of previous years,
It may be a replay, but it's become, in my view, more obvious. The gross underestimating of what revenues will be. So he's projecting with these revenue estimates that for the current year, the revenues will be 2.5% below the previous year's revenues. And I have every reason to believe that that's an understatement, meaning not that it'll be even farther below, but actually it will be a growth, revenue growth. And we've just seen this year after year where, when I say year after year, the last couple of years, and we've been having this disagreement with the CFO for several years about cash reserves. 2 years ago, when he forced the mayor to zero out the pay equity program, because he insisted that money be put in reserves. And when I said why, and he said, because I will not certify the budget as balanced. And we got an opinion from the Attorney General that the CFO was acting beyond his authority. Well, actually, and when he said he would not certify the budget as balanced, I said to him, excuse me, but revenues or money available and spending, that's balanced. And he said, no, we could have a liquidity problem in 2028, which was 3 years later. Liquidity in 3 years is not the same as a balanced budget. This is all to say that we've been having this continuing disagreement with him about cash.
So, just a follow-up, what possibility is there around having a conversation? Because
A conversation with who?
with the CFO,
We've had many conversations with the CFO.
understood. So, it appears that he has concerns about the district's fiscal future. And, is there some sort of middle ground possibly around, so given if the $180 million question doesn't get rectified,
$80 million, $180 million.
the revenue estimate.
You're talking about the,
Yes, sir.
yeah, it's actually 250 or 260 million. Why the difference? Because for 1 year, it's maybe 180 million. But for the tax filings right now, there is a retroactivity that goes back to 24 and 23, if I remember correctly. And when you add it all up, it's about 260 million.
Wanted to move on briefly. So with the two accountability bills, so we've seen already that Interim Chief Carroll, in terms of answering the questions that Councilmember Pinto forwarded to him before the hearing, he hasn't quite been forthright. He gives, I don't want to say excuses, but explanations as to why he can't acquiesce to those sort of demands. What reassurance do you have that with these emergency bills passing, that MPD would even or the executive as a whole would even just follow through? What assurance do you have? And if they don't follow through, what action would the council take?
Well, as to the very last question, I can't speculate what action the council would take. What assurance? As I said before, I think there is this blur between not cooperating and being present to protect DC residents. I have no reason to believe, as I'm standing here, that if we require that body worn camera footage be turned over, I have no reason to believe it won't be turned over. That was a double negative. I have reason to believe it will be turned over. I didn't like the way that sounded. I'm confident it would be turned over,
Where do you get that confidence from?
but I'm a confident guy.
I mean, but it's, so from August on, based on what's happened from August on, what's giving
Well,
you?
there are a couple of differences. For one thing, we're not under the so-called emergency that the president called, and we have a different chief of police. Maybe a third difference is that we've had 5, 6 months of experience of seeing where there have been transgressions, like I mentioned, that September incident outside the charter school, which, by the way, is being investigated. And we've just had the experience of how ICE is excessive in its tactics. You know, Ben had a question.
So a couple weeks ago, or the Office of Lottery and Gaming testified before the council in its oversight hearing that it's concerned that it hasn't received any expression of interest from a gaming operator for poker or blackjack in DC. That's coming off of Bowser's proposed legislation to allow poker and blackjack in like restaurants and hotels. They say they're hearing that it is cost prohibitive for an operator to operate outside of a casino environment. And that's kind of the holdup preventing interest on this. I'm wondering, one, if DC put out a request for expressions of interest, and two, why there is no interest in this. It seems like it was a big piece of the mayor's economic development agenda last budget season.
Let me see, how do I want to answer that? First of all, lottery charitable gaming is not under the committee as a whole, so I'm not as involved. I was not at that hearing. Second, personally, I'm not excited about any of this expansion with regard to legalized gambling. Third, we are a small jurisdiction, and that could be a factor in what's going on here. And fourth, this was one of the aspects of the so-called growth agenda about which I took a dim view. If it were to happen, it would be a couple of years. When I think about what a growth agenda for the city, I'm thinking short term. I mean, there's some long-term strategies like, oh gosh, a football stadium in 2030. But short term, I think short term, and ideas like that are not a short term.
Can you say more about why you're not excited about it?
I just think there's an awful lot of gambling, and I don't think that's the way we should be building our economy. I think we should be looking to diversify in other ways, like healthcare, doing much more with healthcare. We have what, 5, 6 major hospitals in the city? Grow them, create more of a nexus with NIH when NIH comes back into existence, and really build healthcare as an alternative. We could be doing more with universities. We have a lot of universities. We don't think of ourselves as a college town. Why not? Get more universities. These are ways we can get away from the federal government. I think IT, we could be doing more there. There was hesitation on the part of the executive a couple of years ago when council put money in the budget for an IT incubator at Union Market, which has proven to be very successful. Let's do more of that. And not just simply have an announcement and sort of this conceptual, this is where we're going to go, but actually putting money in the budget to stimulate that incubator at Union Market and do other things like that. And we could be doing much more with business retention and attraction. We really do very little in that regard, and let's hold on to what we've got and attract more.
The lottery office also testified that it has not received any applications for commercial bingo, which the council did approve last year as part of the budget. Do you know why that might be?
Don't. I don't.
Just turning back to decoupling, I mean, beyond what the CFO has said, we're in the midst of tax filing season. You said last week that 75,000 plus people have already filed. I keep getting questions from.
That was as of February 19th, it was 75,000.
All right, fair. So now that it's March 2nd, let's assume it could be closer to 100,000.
Right.
I keep getting questions from friends, and actually, I haven't, full disclosure, I haven't filed because I have no idea if they're going to, if this is
Quick for the cops. It's before the deadline.
before the deadline.
Safe.
So I think a lot of residents are understandably concerned that they keep hearing this back and forth between branches of government over what the tax law of the land is. Do you think at this point, given that the CFO has basically said, he seems to be hinting that he thinks it's the law, but even if it's the law, he's not going to let you guys use the revenue. So what ultimately would you be getting out of it? So do you think the council should just call it a loss and recouple? I mean, I've heard rumors that there are members who want to just fully recouple, like end this experiment in decoupling because it's become too much of a pain in the butt.
I don't like calling it an experiment, so I'm going to go there for a second. As of the end of last year, and my data is a little old because it's been about a month since I looked at this, but as of the end of 2025, 12 states had affirmatively decoupled from the HR1 legislation. So there was nothing unusual, unique about what we did. We decoupled, not entirely, but we decoupled in 2017 after the first Trump administration tax bill. There are roughly 20 states that have what's called static conformity, which means that they would have to affirmatively couple, but they didn't. So they're decoupled. So if you take the 20 plus the 12, that's 32. That's roughly, help me here, 2/3 of the states. Maybe I'm off, close, that are decoupled from the HR1. We did nothing. I would hardly call it an experiment. It was
No one's, just real quick, no one is disagreeing. I don't think anybody would disagree on the numbers here, but the point is like DC is not fundamentally a state or a state at all. This is the one place that Congress could repeal the districts decoupling.
and Congress never has. So I resent the idea that it was an experiment. It was something that we have done over and over. States have done over and over. 2/3 of the states have done with HR1. Hardly call it an experiment. But there was more to your question, which was,
Basically, at this point, given all the confusion that this has spawned, not just
we just recoupled.
but within the branches of government, I mean, I can't find any branch of this district of the city government that can agree on what this means or what it does mean or what the path forward is. Do you think the council, as some members have suggested, should just recouple and just?
Well, I'm not sure there's such disagreement between the different branches. I happen to think that Brian Schwab's legal opinion was surprising in the fact that I expected one argument that Congress missed a deadline, and there were 4 arguments, and that the temporary, which is what Congress disapproved, is almost irrelevant with regard to, in fact, it is irrelevant to the Attorney General's opinion, because the law is the law as it was on December 31st, according to case law in other jurisdictions, I think nationally, as well as the district. A pretty strong case. So I don't know that I would agree with you that there's this huge disagreement between all the different branches, but you are right. There are a couple members that have talked about recoupling. I think that would be very unpopular with residents who are tired of seeing government officials acquiescing to federal bullying. And I also think that nobody's really thought about the fact that the 100,000 taxpayers who were hoping for finality when they filed their returns are now going to be affirmatively disrupted. If we recouple, will be affirmatively disrupted and inconvenienced and forced to refile. There are a lot of problems with recoupling. besides the fact that we lose the revenue and arguably we concede the precedent that Congress doesn't have to pay attention to the 30-day deadline. Although I think there's a way we could deal with that point. There will be a significant cash flow issue. We get our cash in April that's supposed to last us through August. And we will not get the cash through in April to last us through August. That's a significant, $450 million is what the CFO said. That's a significant problem. And then I don't think anybody's thought about this, but the CFO said last week at a hearing that it would be 5 to 10 million. I'm guessing it'll be closer to $10 million for him to have to rewrite the forms, rewrite the software, and just go through all the new effort to create a new tax filing deadline with tax filing instructions. So that's $10 million we didn't budget that we would have to pay, plus the cash flow, plus the disruption to everybody, plus the precedent.
Wait, real quick, have you filed your taxes? Just out of curiosity?
I've not.
Are you planning on doing it soon?
Am I planning on filing my taxes? Yes. Soon, I have 6 weeks. I'll do it within 6 weeks. That's soon.
To clarify for any residents who still may be confused, DC is still moving forward with decoupling, and has the federal government pushed back any further since the AG's legal opinion?
I have not heard anything from any branch or office in the federal government. So that's as to whether they pushed back. I mean, there's a lot of speculation on what could happen, and it's kind of hard to argue with the speculation, but there's been nothing specific that has happened. Is that your entire question?
Is DC still?
Well, I don't know that I would say moving forward. What the CFO has said is that taxpayers should file according to the emergency, which is in effect right now.
So meaning the decoupling?
That is, yes.
Follow up on, I think the conversation that you were having with Sam. You, during some of these meetings, when it was former Police Chief Smith, you expressed some concern about the lack of clarity about how security was cooperating with MPD. I guess I'm just trying to gauge when how you shifted to being more confident in the sense you mentioned, well, we have a new chief, but that the DC officers are there to kind of make sure that DC's rights are being respected, given you cited the example that happened outside the middle school. Like, have you gotten additional information or further clarity from Interim Chief Carroll to kind of turn the page a little bit more?
Well, I've talked to the chief a couple times, and his explanations to me have been very credible. I also think that we've learned a lot from, I hate to use this word, transition from the federal so-called emergency. We've learned a lot, so that I think there is greater separation because of that. I would note that the September incident outside the school, which I think was inexcusable and horrible, one could say that it was close to the emergency, and therefore there was this like transition period. That might help explain why that happened. We haven't seen something like that in the last couple of months. I'm just kind of speculating here.
Have you saw any more clarity related to the shooting, the HSI officers shooting towards the drivers in DC? I know obviously they didn't proceed with any charges or anything like that, but any else that you can?
I don't have any more details about it. I think those incidents were horrible, and I'm glad that if I remember correctly, the individuals are suing. I mean, these federal agents ought to be held accountable for their unconstitutional and illegal behavior. Mark.
Back to decoupling, I just want to, it sounds like you're gonna wait until the CFO makes the final decision which way he's gonna go, one way or another. That sound correct?
Well, when he briefed me on the revenue estimates on Thursday, I said, so because I wasn't getting a very clear answer. I said, what are you gonna do on March 3rd? Because the emergency expires on March 2nd or something like that. What are you gonna tell people on March 3rd? And he said, I don't know.
So what?
I don't know.
Right, I think that's the crux of the problem that we're trying to get at is like this.
Well, my name is not Glenn Lee, so I can't answer the question.
So you're not gonna do anything until, and I'm just wondering, you or the council, do you anticipate any legislation being proposed tomorrow or any movement to recall that might at least be debated or discussed tomorrow?
There's been no legislation filed to be on the agenda, and the agenda is basically closed, so I do not anticipate that there will be,
So, the ball is in the CFO's court as far as you're concerned.
as far as I'm concerned, yes.
So
Do you entertain the hypothetical?
It depends on whether I like it or not.
If the CFO reverses course and sides with Congress and chooses to reinterpret and recouple, would you go to court over that?
I would be very critical. I think that's all I will say.
You've already been very critical. Would you go to court? Would you take that step?
That's my answer. I will be very critical.
Can I ask you about the sewage spill next door? DC Water is about.
I'm gonna change the subject.
Is about to testify
Oh.
next door. There's a common theme that has come up. Both from DC residents, the stakeholders who are testifying, even the mayor and members of Congress have been critical of DC Water's lack of transparency and public messaging throughout this. I'm wondering what your level of confidence is in Mr. Gaddis to lead this agency through this crisis, and whether you believe DC Water has been transparent as they should and forthcoming as they should in messaging. I think everybody agrees, and anyone who's wearing a hard hat over there is doing a pretty great job. That's also a common theme throughout all the public testimony. But when it comes to the public messaging on this, there's been a lot of criticism, again, from stakeholders next door. Congressman Van Hollen, Mayor Bowser has said it's regrettable. What are your thoughts on Mr. Gaddis and your confidence in him moving forward?
Sure. So I do not have an issue with his leadership. It's a little different than the question as I heard it, which is the communications by DC Water. I think the communications have not been clear enough. And yes, they are, they deserve criticism, the communications. We, as you know, were briefed rather extensively 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And I will apologize again to the press that this kind of came up at the last minute, which is why we didn't, and we should have told the press that we were going to get that briefing.
The last minute. You certainly knew the day before.
Yes, I did. That's the last minute.
It's the last minute.
It's the last minute for me.
Give us notice.
So we screwed up there. But I thought the briefing was credible. And what I heard from the briefing was that they have contained the overflow and they've contained it for several weeks.
Okay, can I stop you right there?
You know,
Why do you believe, I mean, and that's been a critical issue with the
I'm
excited messaging, is that it is not contained. 40 million gallons of sewage is spewing out of there into the CNO canal. Just because it's not going into the river doesn't mean that it is in any way contained. There's a massive hole in this underground pipeline.
well, you're right.
They're
You're right.
right. So when you say to the public on camera that it's contained, this is the mismessaging that DC Water has been banking on, that people like you in leadership positions.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you, Mark, because I think of the spill as being a spill into the river.
Well, then you're missing, because the spill goes, it's not just the river that's being damaged. The CNO Canal, the wildlife, the land out there is so being polluted. As recently as Super Bowl Sunday, there was a 600,000 gallon overflow into the river. That possibility lurks as long as there is a hole.
That's correct too.
And it is not, and just, I'm sorry, you pressed, you pushed my.
I can tell I did.
When you say.
And I don't want to be glib about it, no, but to me, contained means not flowing into the river. And DC Water, when they briefed the council, was clear that if there is an extraordinary event, and maybe Super Bowl Sunday was that, because we know how that works on sewage. And if there was a major storm, that there could be another overflow into the river. they can't rebuild the sewer pipe in a day. They've said they're gonna do it. I'm not gonna try to remember the exactly when, but they say they're gonna do it in the next few weeks. And until then, yes, it's in the canal. Where I was going to go was that there's a lot of concern about what the effect is on the Potomac. And the data that we were given says that when you get south, not too far south, I think Fletcher's, the testing in the water is within recreational safe levels. Does that mean everything's wonderful? No. And I've heard speculation about what this could mean in terms of algae blooms in the summer. We don't know, or at least I don't know. And my sense is that they are moving as quickly as they can to get this all repaired. It was explained to us that this part of the pipe had been on their list. They did not think it was going to collapse, so they didn't think it was imminent, but it was on the list for repair, and it collapsed earlier than anybody anticipated. I don't know what they could have done to prevent that, other than maybe to move up their repair schedule by a couple of years. I'm not sure what else to say on this. But the communication, I mean, at our briefing, it was I think it was actually DDOE who said they would go swimming or fishing in the river and walk that back. So there's been a problem with the communication. I'm being told that I have to cut this off. 3 more. Sam. 4 more. Sam.
All right, so as you and I discussed briefly, you yesterday were at Reverend Graylan Hagler's homegoing. One of the activists who took to the pulpit criticized the council for not advancing an emergency resolution as it relates to what's going on currently on the Gaza Strip.
No, not currently. This was a year ago.
Currently going on the Gaza Strip. So since then, Israel and the United States, they have collaborated around, or better yet, Donald Trump has, on behalf of Israel, bombed Iran. And this is after actions in Venezuela and in Cuba. I'm saying all of this to ask what consideration, given Reverend Graylan Hagler's legacy for pressing the council and given the dire circumstances, what consideration is there around the exploration of a resolution and criticism of President Trump's actions in Iran, seeing as this is a total advancement from what, according to activists, the DC Council has now weighed in on a year or so ago, or a couple of years ago now?
Yes, it was a couple of years ago. I can give you my personal view. From the standpoint of the council, we have come to realize that we're going to just stay out of foreign policy. So I don't think you're going to see statements from the council with regard to foreign policy.
So even with DC residents going abroad to fight this war and possibly, well, not possibly, getting killed abroad, DC families, and just in terms of the foreign policy piece, my understanding was that in 2002, the DC Council advanced an emergency resolution in criticism of President Bush's use of powers as it relates to Iraq. So I'm just
That may be, but as I said, it's been my view, and I think the council members agree that we stay out of foreign policy.
So why is that?
Well, we're not responsible for foreign policy, and I don't think that a resolution from the council is really going to make a difference in terms of decisions by the president or the federal government with regard to foreign policy. And I think the appropriate body to comment with regard to acts of war would be the Congress, not a city council. I mean, I don't think the District of Columbia has a greater role in foreign policy than, let's say, the City Council of Los Angeles or Chicago.
The nation's capital, and there have been parallels between what's happening abroad to what's happening currently. People would argue, that that from August on, there's an occupation going on in DC. The people have.
I understand that argument, so let's stick to the local issues, like whether we should have a National Guard in the district.
There are parallels though, but you gave your answer, so.
Correct. I also sat next to the guy who was celebrating disrupting the council. Jenny, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just quickly, you mentioned, yeah, that the CFO tends to, I guess, underestimate the revenue repeatedly. And he had a pretty like kind of dire warning or just a strong warning that next year, DC would enter a recession. And I'm wondering how seriously you take that.
I don't remember him saying we will.
He said.
He has said this is federal cutback in workforce is like a recession on the area, but
In his letter, likely a recession.
well, I'm looking at his briefing. Uncertainty around congressional actions, changes to federal employment, population growth stalling and declining tourism. He didn't say anything about recession in his.
On page 9, combined with the relocation of key federal agencies and tighter immigration policies, these developments are likely to push the region into an economic recession. The district's economy is now expected to enter a moderate recession in FY 2026, with real GDP projected to contract by 2.9%. I'm just wondering how seriously you take that warning, given that you say, his estimates are.
Well, I think all of it seriously. I will tell you that my page 9. I think we're looking at different documents. That's my page 9 with him.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at his letter, not the.
Okay. Well, his revenue estimate shows that our revenues are projected to grow by 2.6% next year and 3.3% the following year. And so if he's projecting a recession, he's also projecting revenue growth. But he's projecting that our revenues for this year, 26, will be down 2.5% compared to last year. And it was last year where I looked at calendar year 24 projections for FY 25. He was only off by $500 million. I think he is hyper concerned about cash to the detriment of citizens. I'm trying to get out of here because I have I need more hands, quick.
So the National Capital Planning Commission is voting this week on potentially the first or final review of the White House, depending on what they decide. I'm curious where you stand on the design right now.
Well, you know that I've asked questions. I asked questions at the last meeting of NCPC where this was presented. I can't say I was satisfied with the answers because to the extent I got answers, it was sort of like, well, the president needs this. So that doesn't quite answer the planning questions that are the responsibility of NCPC. So we will see. I'm planning on being there on, I think it's virtual, but I'm planning on being there on Thursday. Probably not for the whole meeting, but.
Are you going to support it?
Oh, why would I predict now what I'm going to do on Thursday? I have to see the presentation.
I don't think it's changed.
Ren, have you been briefed on any updated security procedures here in DC?
No, I have not.
Following the strikes on Iran?
I have not. Martin, you're the last question. Unless I don't like your question.
Alongside this issue of the 180 million and, your disagreement with the CFO, there's also the issue of how the mayor treated your guys' initial contingency list. I know you guys may be making changes to that, but the fact of the matter is you guys passed the law. The mayor said, I don't really have to do anything with this, even though it's the law. And it seems like there's this kind of long run fight that you've had with either the mayor or the CFO, where the council does things and neither the mayor or the CFO choose to do them. Is there anything the council could do to ensure that things that you do get done, given that you are, especially when it comes to appropriation, but when you hold the purse strings, but it often feels like the mayor and the CFO that you kind of don't.
Well, there's a difference between the mayor and the CFO. So the mayor is responsible for implementing the budget. The mayor also is responsible for carrying out policy. Neither of those are responsibilities of the CFO. I mean, you could say implementing the budget, but really more as a ministerial act. He's responsible for making sure that agencies don't overspend. And then writing the checks, as well as the revenue projections, as well as looking at whether the budget that we adopt is balanced. So they have different roles. When we drafted the SNAP provision a year ago, we used language that we can't use for the entire budget. And the language we used gave the mayor no discretion. But generally for the entire budget, there's more discretion on the part of the mayor because we don't say in the budget, for example, we're gonna give the Department of Buildings $60 million, and they shall spend a quarter of it in the first quarter. We don't appropriate that way. Is it a source of tension? Yes. When the council says that we want early childhood educators to be funded, we want early childhood educators to be funded. It's an excellent program, and we are a leader in the country. You can check with other cities. And so when the mayor doesn't do that, yes, it is a good way of angering the sister branch of the government. So I'm making a distinction between the mayor and the CFO and pointing out that there are some things the mayor can do, but that doesn't mean she should. And I think I have to call it quits for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.